1,000 metres below the surface of the Mediterranean, lies the wreck of a British legend. She was sunk at the very height of World War II. Now, with unique underwater footage, we tell the story of the ship that bears one of the greatest names in naval history, Ark Royal. The first Ark Royal was flagship of the fleet that defeated the Spanish Armada. Another Ark Royal fought during the First World War. And this one here is the 5th ship to carry that name. But the most famous Ark Royal of them all fought through the darkest days of the Second World War, and it became a symbol of Britain's heroic stand against Nazi Germany. This giant aircraft carrier changed the face of naval warfare. But then, at the height of the war, she was sunk. For 3 years, we searched for her wreck. Now, veterans who served aboard her will be the very first to see their ship after 64 years, and finally tell the story of her last desperate hours. The Ark Royal gained its legendary status in one of the greatest sea battles of the Second World War, when in 1941 the Royal Navy set out to sink the Bismarck. The battleship Bismarck was the most feared weapon in the German Navy.
In this, perhaps the most dramatic naval film ever taken, you see salvos from the Bismarck while the Nazi ship was running from the guns of our squadron.
Swordfish aircraft Ark Royal managed to cripple the Bismarck with an airdrop torpedo attack that struck the rudders of the legendary German battleship. Amazingly, one of the men who flew the Swordfish on the mission that crippled the Bismarck is still alive. His name is John Moffat and he lives in Scotland. His logbook contains a record of every flight he took from the Ark Royal, including the attack on the Bismarck.
Right away, as soon as that first salvo had gone off, the CO gave a signal to dive. And down we went. I just took one look at this thing and I thought, you're so big, I can't miss you.
At 86, John Moffat still flies, and his own plane has a registration that hints at where his heart really lies. Still, with the Ark Royal.
When I heard that the Ark had officially been hit and sunk, at first I couldn't believe it. That's been quite honest. But when it was verified, I was really very sad about it. Very, very. I had a great affection towards that ship.
Look at the size of this thing. Now, believe it or not, the Second World War Ark Royal was 100 feet longer than this one. In 2002, we began to look for the wreck of that Ark Royal. The Navy had a record of its last known position, so you might think, how hard can it be to find? The Odin Finder steamed out of its port in southern Spain. A search area had been drawn up, covering 280 square miles of the Mediterranean. According to the naval records, the Ark Royal sank near Gibraltar, and there were more than 1,500 eyewitnesses on board when on the 13th of November 1941, she was heading for the safety of her base. At 3:45 in the afternoon, German submarine U-81 fired 4 torpedoes at the giant British ship.
And the ship shook. It was unbelievable. A ship of that tonnage, it just sort of shook.
The decks whipped under your feet, they just seemed to whip under your feet.
Hello, he said. That's a total lack of power. Couldn't work out what the hell had happened.
It whipped me up in the air, and I landed on my shoulder blades, and it knocked all the wind out of my lungs.
And the teacups and plates and whatnot that were on the table for afternoon tea were just crashing onto the floor. Some of them were breaking and whatnot. And the lights then went out.
Only one torpedo actually hit the Ark, and miraculously, only one sailor was killed, but immediately she began to heel over dangerously.
By this time she's over at quite an angle, and there were quite a few people out on the weather deck. And the destroyer Legion was nudging in to come in. They'd put hammocks, rolled up hammocks, all on the forecastle. And there was a chief petty officer there, and he said, when I say jump, jump. And I was the second or third one to jump and landed on the hammock. Within an hour or so, they had 1,500 extra crew on board the Legion.
After 14 hours of desperate struggle, the Ark Royal sank. Despite the fact that we had information about the last hours of the Ark Royal, our initial search for the wreck produced no results. We'd searched 280 square miles of ocean and found nothing. Plainly, the official record of the last movements of the Ark Royal was wrong. Time was running out, and we would have to extend the search. The question is, in what direction? It was decided to head further away from Gibraltar. Then, after 24 hours of fruitless searching, when it seemed that it might all end in failure, the image of a huge object hit the sonar screens. In fact, there seemed to be two objects. One of them was certainly near the size of the Ark, but tantalizingly, with this equipment we could see no more. The Ark Royal was launched on Merseyside in 1937. This Ark Royal was a brand new type of fighting machine. She was the first modern aircraft carrier, and she would carry 60 aircraft and a crew of more than 1,200 young men. Bill Morrison, at 17, had only just joined the Navy when he first saw the Ark.
It was enormous, and quite honestly, I didn't know which was the front or the rear.
Ron Jordan was 18 when he went to sea.
God, the size of this place. Oh, I wondered how it could float.
Bert Arnell, an air mechanic, had served on other ships before joining the Ark.
We had our own bathroom, and there was hot and cold water 24 hours a day, which we'd never had on the other two ships.
And pilot John Moffat was only 19 years old when he joined the crew of the new Ark Royal.
This is a huge ship. I'd never been to sea in my life before. The Ark Royal was my first ship to serve on.
The young men who joined the Ark were proud to serve on her. But when she was lost, they must have been certain that they would never see her again. All we'd found in our initial search for the wreck of the Ark Royal was tantalizing evidence of something massive on the seafloor, miles away from where the evidence suggested the Ark Royal should be. More questions than answers. So 6 months later, a second, much larger vessel left Gibraltar to continue the search.
About 750 on the side. Yeah.
On board this ship is an advanced unmanned submarine. It can dive close to the unidentified objects and create sonar images that may help to identify them. We need to get all the data we can because other large ships have sunk in the area.
It may not be the Ark Royal, but until we go down there and get the imagery, nobody can say.
Diving to 950.
Roger, I'm starting to see a trace of bottom at about 160 meters out.
It takes several hours before the first signals are received from the unmanned submarine.
We're just coming in from the north.
I'm seeing it, yeah. I'm seeing on side scan now, too, a pretty good-sized target. Yeah. This target has a really large shadow. The shadow distance is about 25 meters or more. I'm looking at these ranges here, 50, 75, 100.
The sonar reveals not just two objects, but lots of them. One is very large, but still about 150 feet shorter than the Ark Royal.
We can now look at the different lines that we ran. Some 700 meters down is the main wreckage. We go to the next line. Very large pieces of wreckage here and what looks to be an aircraft.
If this is an aircraft, it's a significant clue that this really is the Ark.
Well, everything we've seen so far matches up with the information that we've got on the Ark Royal. And comparing it with the photographs that we have of the Ark Royal, which showing where the guns were positioned, the shape of the deck all seems to point towards it being the Ark Royal.
But some doubt inevitably remains. The largest object is almost certainly a ship, but it's shorter than the Ark. The technology is impressive, but exactly what is down there still remains a mystery. One way to be absolutely certain is to find some way of filming 1,000 meters below the surface and letting those who know the ship best, its crew, confirm the identification. So in 2004, 5 veterans of the Ark Royal were invited to travel back to the Mediterranean. Pilot John Moffat is one of the crew joining the search.
When the BBC came along and they said that they were going to consider trying to find the wreck of the Ark Royal, well, I was excited when I thought I was going to be able to see the Ark Royal. I didn't believe it, in fact, to be quite honest with you.
So, where are we going to?
Heading for Edinburgh Airport. I'm heading for the Mediterranean.
Mediterranean?
Yes, the Mediterranean,
nice.
yes. We're going in search of a wartime ship called the HMS Ark Royal, which was...
All right, I've heard of that.
Which was, yes.
Well, you don't know where it is, you just...
Well, yes, we have an idea where it is, so we'll take it from there, in other words.
Right.
And I hope that we'll be able to locate it.
Ever since the invention of gunpowder, fighting at sea involved firing guns at the enemy. The bigger the ship, the bigger the gun, the bigger the punch. It was the age of battleships. But by the beginning of the Second World War, there was a new challenger, the aircraft carrier. With an aircraft carrier, it would be possible to attack a battleship from the sky. In May 1940, Germany invaded Norway. It used its huge modern air force and its navy, spearheaded by the battleship Scharnhorst. The Scharnhorst was moored in Trondheim when the Ark Royal sent in its fleet of dive bombers called Skuas. "15 planes from 2 squadrons were sent from the Ark Royal to bomb the German battleship.
To get 2 squadrons ranged all together, it was exceptional. And seeing the different pilots' faces up on the front, and they were all ready to go, really. They thought that with the numbers that were going, that they would be able to achieve something. It was quite something. It was when all the planes had left the flight deck and all of a sudden it was all quiet, and then we'd got to wait and see.
Now, More than 60 years later, several of the surviving members of the Ark Royal's crew are back in the Mediterranean. This time on this ship, the Octopus, as it joins in the final search to locate and film the wreck on the seabed 1,000 metres below. First up is pilot John Moffat. For him, the Ark Royal was always more than just a ship.
We were special, that's right, I think is the word. We felt that the carrier was special. We felt that the people who were running it were special. We felt that as a pilot on board that ship, we were special.
At the start of the war, the 19-year-old John Moffat was trained to fly the Swordfish aircraft. When he was sent to the Ark Royal in Gibraltar, it was the first time he'd ever landed on the deck of a ship. Landing on a cramped deck is always a dangerous business.
The chaps all used to get the cameras out. Hoping, of course. Yes, exactly. They were sure I was going to make a mess of it. There's the rest of wires going across, and there's the landing officer, the fellow with the bats. He obviously has them down, meaning you are down to cut your engine. Of course, the first place you make for is the wardroom, you see.
For these veterans, the search for their ship is a journey back over 60 years.
Oh my goodness.
With the cap on.
Yeah.
Ron Skinner served on the Ark Royal from its first voyage till the day she sank. On arrival, he immediately spots himself in a photograph taken just hours after the Ark Royal was torpedoed.
She was my home from the time I was 20 until I was 23. And so therefore, in that respect, she's a very great part of my life.
The captain doesn't always go where he's meant to go because...
Val Bailey was a fighter pilot. He was the last man to leave the Ark Royal when she sank.
The Ark was a sort of legend. The Ark had something about it, and still has in a funny way. It's a sort of, it's a name that's gone through forever.
John Richardson was a stoker, and the Ark Royal was his first ship.
It was the happiest ship I was ever on. If it comes to a skirmish and it was possible to go with the same people, I would go anywhere. That's the way I feel about it.
Current at the moment is from the south.
Captain Richard Bridge has the latest equipment on board to locate and film the wreck.
We're equipped with a remote-operated vehicle rated to 2,500 metres, so we knew that we could do a very good job of finding and then getting some excellent footage of the wreck.
The equipment is prepared for its first underwater exploration of the site. This remote-controlled robot camera can dive to over 1,000 metres with powerful lights and high-definition cameras to film whatever lies on the seabed. It begins its long descent. There's tension on the bridge. After the years of searching, will we finally see the wreck of the Ark Royal? 40 minutes later, the sub arrives at the bottom of the Mediterranean and starts to travel across the sea floor.
Waves we have here.
In the guest saloon, the veterans wait. The Ark Royal survivors are just beginning to see something. There are pieces of wreckage 1,000 metres below on the sea floor.
60,
But are these fragments part of the Ark Royal? And will they lead us to the wreck itself? It's an agonizing wait as the robot submersible moves at a slow walking pace over the seabed.
About 20 degrees.
Dewey, you might want to steer maybe a bit more astern, like 190, something like that.
After a further 20 minutes, a huge shape begins to loom out of the dark.
Just forward of here. Roger. 10, 12 metres away. 2. Okay, we'll stop there, please. All stopped.
Can you see that in the sort of centre of the picture? Yeah.
Hey, look at that. Look at that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just going to see if I can get the spotlight back on. Please work.
Oh my word. Okay, gents, yeah, that's fantastic. Excellent. We'll
Yeah. Okay, that's it there.
Wow.
That's an Ark searchlight.
It is the wreck of the Ark Royal. The veterans recognise the guns and the searchlights, proving it could be no other ship. The wreck is sitting upright, but it has driven itself deep into the silt.
Another mass seeming like miles forward of that, and then you're getting into that's a hole into the wreck, isn't it? That's not the top of the deck.
That is the top of the deck, yeah.
You think so, or you think that's a...
Well, there's someone we can probably identify, yeah.
The signal line? Yeah. An Eldest line? Yeah. An Eldest line?
Stern like that. Shaded.
The camera travels around, from the light on the stern that the pilots would see as they landed, to the forward section, over 200 metres away.
Okay, that's the end of it, according to the sonar.
What, the end of the wreck?
Yeah.
As the robot camera travels forward, it reveals an enormous surprise.
According to the sonar, there's nothing else in front of this.
A huge section of the front, the entire bows, are missing. Would this explain the second object seen on the original sonar? These images of the wreck of the Ark Royal, brought back from the dead after 64 years, trigger a wave of memories. Bill Morrison is the last of the veterans. Coming on this trip is an opportunity to share memories.
It's amazing how we had still that feeling of Ark Royal camaraderie. It was there, and it still is there.
But inevitably, some memories are sad ones. Ron Skinner, who served on the bridge of the Ark Royal, remembers the fateful attack on the battleship Scharnhorst.
I get highly emotional about this because my job was a silly little job on board, but I had to write the names and the crews on the board on the flight deck, tick them off when they went off, and more tragically, tick them off as they came back. I ticked off 15 and ticked back only 7. So, you know, this was something, the whole ship, we called it a Black Thursday. It was the 13th of June, 1940.
The Ark Royal may have been the wonder of the age, but many of the planes that flew from her deck were desperately poor. 19-year-old George Baldwin had flown the Skua in combat, and he knew its limitations.
It was a modern aircraft where the modernisation hadn't been completed. The performance of the aircraft was inadequate.
As Baldwin discovered when he flew Skuas against the German Messerschmitt Me-109, that plane was fast and deadly.
I was absolutely gobsmacked when I came round the corner, and there were 2 Messerschmitts hacking away at all my chums, and they shot down 4 of them. And so I went down very, very low straight away And I said to my air gunner, no, you watch out, because if one of the ME-109 sees us getting away, he'll come after us. And to my horror, we only just got down to 0 feet. He said, there's a Messerschmitt following me now. I'm going to fly head on straight at the rocks in the island and try and frighten the man away, because otherwise he's going to kill me, and there's no doubt about it. He got within about 1,000 yards, I think. At that point, I do this blimey turn just short of the rock face to starboard, and my air gunner said, he's left you. So I think that was the only time I was really frightened.
The Ark Royal Skua pilots paid the price for their obsolete aircraft. Of the 15 crews that set off to bomb the Scharnhorst, only 7 returned, and the battleship escaped. The remains of some of the Ark Royal pilots who died that day now lie in a graveyard near Trondheim.
I remember we all, in the mess, we auctioned items from the people who had got killed for the relatives, or wives and that, you say, you know, and we all had a bit of a prayer and a bit of a get-together.
The attack on the Scharnhorst had been a tragic mistake. It seemed to some that aircraft carriers were not the decisive weapons that some people had predicted. But the Ark Royal was about to make probably its most important contribution to Britain winning the war, thousands of miles away in the Mediterranean. The Ark Royal steamed into Gibraltar in July 1940 and became part of a special group of ships called Force H.
The Force H time, the time of convoys to Malta from Gibraltar, I think is the outstanding one. I think if one thinks of the Ark, we think of Force H.
The forces of Nazi Germany had swept across Europe, but now Italy was also at war with Britain, and the Mediterranean became the only arena in which Britain could take the war to the enemy. Now the key to the Mediterranean is Malta, and you can see why. Look, it's right here in the middle. The British were clinging on to Malta, from where their submarines and aircraft were a thorn in the side for the Germans and the Italians. Lose Malta, and you risk losing the Battle of the Mediterranean.
The seas were fairly calm, and you'd see, as far as the eye could see, ships of one sort or another just steaming ahead for hour after hour.
The Ark Royal's planes defended the convoys taking food and arms to the besieged island of Malta. So the Ark Royal became the target of everything the German and Italian forces could throw at it. As an Ark Royal gunner, Les Asher's job was to defend the ship from enemy attack.
We were attracting the high-flying aircraft. You could hardly see them. Now, it's no use you firing all your ammunition up as high as all that. It was only when you were going to barrage firing you got more anxious.
Hang on, there's some machining in there. See the optics in there? See the M-sight?
Gleaming in the spotlights is the gun turret's optical sight.
Yeah, you can see the gun layer sight on it.
Les Asher was in charge of this particular gun turret. Over 60 years ago, he looked through this sight as the convoys came under attack.
It's wonderful to see it. Great. 64 years ago. It's a long time.
convoys approached Malta, the attacks became even more ferocious, and the crew knew that they were fighting for their lives.
If anybody says I wasn't scared, they're lying. I was scared. Yeah, and so was everybody else. When they turned down, that's when the pom-poms all opened. That's when they opened up. Yeah.
The pom-pom could deal with it, but it was too close.
It could deal with the torpedoes coming in, torpedo man coming in, but you couldn't get any lower than that. If they got underneath the range of that one, they were in.
Deep in the engine room, John McCrow often had no idea what was going on above.
In the engine room, you could never really discern which was a near miss exploding near you, or if that was your own guns vibrating down the hull of the ship.
The Ark Royal gunners were excellent. There was no two roads about that. They were better than most.
Yeah.
That's why it lasted.
Yes, they were very good. They were very good.
It was a damn good crew, wasn't it?
Yes.
As a last desperate resort, the Ark Royal would even dodge out of the path of the bombs.
The bomb doors are open and the bombs are away. 5 degrees to starboard, sir.
It was very lucky, because any one of those high-level bombs could have hit us.
I think the Ark Royal was a lucky ship.
The Ark defended the convoys, but as well as defending, it could also attack. One of its main weapons was its fleet of Swordfish aircraft. There were 36 Swordfish on the Ark Royal. Despite looking like something from the First World War rather than the Second, the Swordfish was a formidable weapon. It could carry torpedoes, mines and bombs for hundreds of miles.
The Swordfish was one of the best aircraft I know. It did the job. That's the thing. You name it, it did it.
The earlier underwater survey had discovered something that might be an aircraft.
And what looks to be an aircraft.
The enhanced sonar image now suggests that it could be a Swordfish. It's lying next to another mysterious structure. They decide to send the robot camera to investigate. It's a chance to locate one of the original Swordfish from the flight deck of the Ark Royal. It would be an extraordinary find. Out of over 2,000 that were built, only a handful survive.
How far have they travelled now? Do you reckon?
What, from the main wreck there? Yeah. Probably about 100 metres, probably about 300 feet, something like that.
The robot camera moves over the seabed and discovers that the mysterious object is a hangar lift. The lift which carried aircraft up to the flight deck. It's lying upside down, suggesting that it was ripped out as the Ark sank. The Swordfish aircraft must be nearby.
So we should be getting close to the position of the what we think is the aircraft somewhere.
John Moffat, who flew Swordfish from the Ark Royal, is the first to identify the wreckage.
That looks like Swordfish. There we are, there's a bit of undercarriage. That's the Swordfish wheel.
Swordfish wheel.
Yeah.
This is one of the Ark Royal's 36 Swordfish, but it's in terrible condition.
Look at that.
Sadly, the canvas-covered structure has been slowly eaten away by the seawater and has collapsed.
What sort of engine did they have, the Swordfish, John?
Radio.
Radio engine?
Nine cylinder.
Okay. That should be fairly clear.
What remains is just a fragile pile of metal struts, a silt-covered propeller, and just behind that, the engine.
And that's the Swordfish engine.
And that's the engine cowl behind it.
That's the exhaust ring.
Right.
It's come forward.
Yeah.
You see? Towards the propeller, yeah.
The robot camera moves slowly not to disturb the delicate remains.
That's the top main plane, you see, up above there.
Yeah.
Okay? That's the centre section that's been left. The wings are off.
Right.
And that's the centre section that's been left. We're looking where the cockpit would be.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Almost as if you were sitting there.
Yeah. That's brilliant. That is fantastic.
The sight of the Swordfish skeleton prompts memories of one of the Ark's most momentous achievements. On the 18th of May 1941, the greatest threat to British control of the Atlantic put to sea. The Bismarck, the biggest and most heavily armed battleship in the German fleet. Just a week after steaming into the Atlantic, in her very first engagement, she sank Britain's biggest battleship, the Hood. Recorded on this unique film is the terrible moment the Hood exploded. Only 3 sailors from a crew of over 1,400 survived.
We didn't have a ship anything like that in the British Navy. That was something. It was huge.
After sinking the Hood, the Bismarck was running for the safety of a French port. Only the Ark Royal could cut her off and save the reputation of the Royal Navy. In the early evening of the 26th of May, in a brutal gale, John Moffat and 14 other Swordfish pilots took off to sink the Bismarck.
The carrier was like that, and the next minute the carrier was like that, pitching 55 feet, and the seas coming over the bows as well. The deck awash.
You left the deck in that condition.
That's right.
When John broke through the clouds, he found he was almost on top of the Bismarck.
All of a sudden, it was all hell let loose at 6,000 feet. Shells bursting all round about.
To launch a torpedo, John had to dive down to sea level and fly low and steadily straight at the Bismarck. It took immense skill and courage.
I tell you, I really was scared. It's coming at you like hail. And I couldn't understand the cover they were missing you. But the nearer I got, believe it or not, it was coming over the top of my main plane, zipping over. We were coming in, and I thought to myself, I'm just about in range now.
Right.
You know, see, but you've got just less than 2,000 yards, you see. And my observer was shouting at me, "Not yet, not yet." And I couldn't understand. No, what are he to do? Well, not yet. Yeah, not yet. And he said, "Wait, not yet, wait, not yet." And I thought to myself, and I turned round just quickly to look, and there he was hanging over the side of the aeroplane, and I mean hanging right out over the side. Yeah, right out over the side, head down. And then it dawned on me what he was after. You see, he made sure that my torpedo went into a trough, because if it hit the top of those big, huge waves, it would go anywhere.
Absolutely.
You see? So, and it was him that said, "Now, let her go." And he went in, and he shouted to me, "We've got a runner." And that's when I did a runner.
One of the torpedoes launched hit the Bismarck and struck the rudder. Unable to steer, she was easy prey for the pursuing ships of the British Navy as they closed in for the kill.
When these pictures were taken during the action, the Bismarck was nearing her end.
The next day, they pounded the Bismarck to a smoking hulk. Just over 100 sailors would survive from a crew of more than 2,000. One tiny plane from the Ark Royal had brought about the destruction of the Bismarck. From this point on, German raiders never again dared enter the Atlantic. It was an absolutely vital turning point in the war.
And we took off again in the morning at about 7 o'clock, and I flew over the deck, I bet not 20 feet off it. Poor thing. Really was in its, just belching black smoke on its side. Just like that.
So this was just after when she went over?
That's right, when she turned sideways.
It was the following day, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. Following morning.
The Royal Navy had sunk the Bismarck on her very first mission.
The First Lord came aboard to congratulate the Royal Navy on their triumph. You can imagine the feelings of the ship's company at this moment.
This was the first chance we'd had of going out and having a crack at the Huns. And we were all very glad that we hit a really good target.
I can't tell you what relish it was, with what relish we watched the destruction of this ship. We simply loved every moment of it.
But for others directly involved in the action, the feelings were more muted.
What was the feeling like on board when you knew you'd stopped her?
No jollifications or
just a day's work.
Went to the wardroom to get a drink and say, there by the grace of God.
Yeah. But having said that, when the hood went,
that was right. Yeah.
That's when the Bismarck was sunk.
Yeah, that's right.
She couldn't get away. She had to be sunk.
Yes, but the chaps on board hadn't seen those chaps that we'd seen in the water.
Quite. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Don't forget. Hundreds of them with no chance. None at all. Terrible seas.
By now, the Ark Royal was so famous that she became a movie star in her own right. This is Ships with Wings, a wartime propaganda film packed with adventure, romance, real-life footage from the Ark Royal, and of course, cutting-edge special effects. The reality, of course, was that the Ark returned to duty in the Mediterranean, defending the convoys. The old skewer fighters had now been replaced by the slightly more up-to-date Fulmars. Val Bailey flew Fulmars and knew that they, too, had their limitations.
They were slow. 247 knots vertically downwards. Wouldn't go any further. Terminal velocity.
At the height of the battle, it was the Ark's Fulmar fighters that defended the convoys. The Fulmars shot down many enemy aircraft, but because of the Fulmar's limitations, not all of them returned. On its next dive, the robot camera is going to investigate the other large object to the south of the main wreck. On its way, it has to travel through a field of unidentified objects.
Control room, Captain.
Guy, do you fancy having a look at that locker?
Yep.
Yeah.
53 meters. I'm going to be that bit there, really.
When the Ark sank and broke in two, she scattered thousands of objects over a huge area of seabed.
I don't know if it's possible to see if it's exposed or not.
There are frames on it. Can we zoom and light that far?
There's an aircraft section there.
Yeah, we think this might be a part of an aircraft we're seeing.
Yeah.
Just hold it there. That's the tail of an aircraft. Yeah.
What sort of aircraft is that?
Oh, so they're looking at its former.
Yeah.
And the tail wheel lights. And the lights and the rudder.
They will have, yeah.
Incredible.
So you've got some stills of that, I take it?
Yeah, I think we're taking stills at the moment.
I would imagine so. Thank you.
It is a Fulmar aircraft, and pilot Val Bailey remembers it well.
Might have been mine, you never know. It was a fighter in its day, because it had 8 front guns. It was lovely and roomy. I'd been flying Hurricanes before, and which was a lovely, lovely airplane, but this really was sitting in a sort of armchair, which was very good.
It's a Fulmar graveyard. In this one, the dials and instruments are still visible in the cockpit.
Let's go and have a look at the big section.
Yeah.
Okay.
The robot vehicle moves on to investigate the final piece of the wreckage. Nearly a kilometre from the main hull is a section that rises over 25 metres from the sea floor.
That big bit over there, yeah.
Yeah, this is radio mast still attached to the hull.
We finally found the bow section of the ship. It was ripped from the main hull as she sank. It's resting upside down. Its flight deck is on the bottom, and the keel is pointing upwards.
Yeah, we're now moving down the hull, down towards the keel. Yeah, and that is the keel. Look at that. Oh wow. Oh my word, look at that. That is a big, big section. That's a fish. It's
Coming back down the bows, the camera reveals one of the most distinctive features of the Ark, known as the ship's eyes. And the rope that's still attached to the eyes after 64 years is an important clue to exactly what happened that night of the 13th of November 1941, when the most modern ship in the British Navy was sunk by a single torpedo in calm seas. How did just one torpedo rip this massive ship apart? And why was the Ark found far from the official position of the wreck? The truth is contained in documents that were kept secret for 30 years. The basic facts are not in doubt. The Ark Royal was hit by a torpedo fired from a German U-boat. She was hit amidships and part of the boiler room flooded. She immediately started listing to starboard. All power was lost and an order was given to abandon ship. Val Bailey and another pilot managed to lower one of the Ark's lifeboats.
We sat there, this particular boat, and the commander appeared up on the flight deck, which is a long way up there, and he said, "What are you doing down there?" Percy said, "Lower the boat, sir." And he said, "Don't be so stupid. Come back inboard."
The veterans confirm that most of the crew were ordered to go on board the decks of a destroyer, HMS Legion, that had come alongside. But despite the order to abandon ship, a skeleton crew remained to try and save the Ark Royal. She was powerless, taking on water.
Deep in the bowels of the ship, the engine room was a hellhole, but John McCrow and the other engineers were making heroic efforts to restore power.
There was torches flashing around and whatnot, and a horrible smell of fuel oil, seawater.
But eventually they managed to start one of the boilers, and power to the pumps was restored.
We had 8 75-ton pumps, but once they got these going, they brought the ship back from a list of about 23 degrees around about 17. And it was holding it at that.
That night, the Ark Royal had been stabilised. The crew had managed to stop the flooding and even get the ship back onto something like an even keel. But up top, the salvage effort was a lot less impressive. 3 tugs had been sent out from Gibraltar to tow the ship to safety, but one of them had got the tow rope wrapped around her own propeller. Another one had got lost.
The secret inquiry makes it clear that with only one of the Gibraltar tugs actually towing her, the Ark couldn't make any headway against the current, and she was drifting inexorably away from Gibraltar.
Their only hope was to get the ship's own engines working to try and fight the current. The fateful decision was made. With a heroic effort, the crew managed to get one of the propellers turning, but the result was a disaster.
The additional thrust that had been put on started to weaken some more of the bulkheads. Some of the seams were starting to go. There was water spurting through bulkheads that had been weakened, so they were collapsing, and you were getting more an onrush of the sea coming in, and that's why she was going over so fast.
By 4:30 in the morning, after 14 hours of valiant effort, it was obviously hopeless, and the last 2 men left the Ark as she began to sink.
Who was the last person off?
Me.
Really?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Launch went past. Said, Ark Royal ahoy. Anybody on board, last call? And we said, perhaps it's time to go. And Guy and I were standing on the water's edge. And I pushed him and said, hooray, I'm the last man off.
By the time the Ark sank, the crew who'd been taken off the night before by the Legion were safe in Gibraltar, awaiting news.
We were completely convinced it would be saved. And even when we were on the jetty the following morning at Gibraltar, we were expecting to see the Ark appear. We were appalled when it didn't. We didn't think it was a death blow.
The ship that had steamed into the Atlantic to help sink the Bismarck, the ship that was defying the Axis air forces in the Mediterranean, was gone. Morale in Britain was bound to suffer. The captain was court-martialed, and the Navy set about mythologizing the Ark Royal itself. They published a booklet soon after. It characterized its loss as a heroic rescue attempt that had taken the ship close to Gibraltar and had nearly succeeded, but not quite.
Now, of course, we know that's not entirely true. Thanks to a botched rescue mission, the Ark Royal, when she sank, was actually drifting away from Gibraltar.
Despite all this, the story of the Ark remains a heroic one. Its name lives on in new ships, but this Ark Royal will always have a special place in the history of the Royal Navy and the history of Britain. The last official dive is over. The 5 former members of the Ark Royal's crew have had a unique glimpse into a relic from their past.
Perhaps I'm a silly old man, but it does tie me up very much at times. Sorry. I'm a fool with these things, but it does. When I look at that, it does really make me feel very sad, but wonderfully exhilarated to be here.
The crew of the Octopus have been so moved by the stories of the Ark Royal that they have arranged a special dive. piloting the robot vehicle is much like flying a plane. So they want to give John Moffat the chance to relive his past.
If we get the opportunity and we're going up the flight deck, we can maybe let you land it one more time, eh?
Well, now there we are. That's the thing.
If you rotate the joystick left and right, we get left and right. Okay, so try it. Laterally to the right. Okay, we're just above the flight deck. That's it, you're lined up. So push forward. Oh. Yeah, you're doing it, John.
Okay.
That's it. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. That's you going on to the flight deck.
We're just skimming along.
And that's you on the flight deck. God.
Well, I know it.
What do you think of that, John?
Fabulous, absolutely. That is amazing. Fancy landing on the deck at about 2,000 feet down. I tell you, oh Lord, it's hard to be humble.
The last dive is over. And now, once again, the Ark will be left alone a kilometre below the surface of the Mediterranean.
It's a shame, really, in a way, that it's so damaged, but I'm sure it'll always be remembered. I will, that's for sure, and I'm sure the Navy ships that pass there will salute it.
Here are some of the ship's company back in Britain and looking forward to a well-deserved month's leave. 3 of them came to the mic.
Here we are, back in London, after many adventures from the Ark Royal. We're very glad to be here.
The pay commander was saved, and the ship's money, a large sum, and we also saved the 2 cats, one Oscar and the other Harry.
And there are more personal memories on BBC4 shortly in Ark Royal, The Sailor's Story.